Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
All right, so we're back for another episode, off for a couple of weeks, but that doesn't keep us down. We're always here to go through all the science and technology and culture topics that we can find. I was personally inspired this week because I happened to be watching an old Jamie Oliver episode where, can't remember what it was called, but he was focused on sugar and, you know, its infiltration into society, and how I think the key takeaway being, obviously there was a whole lot of exploring in hospitals and the types of surgeries and stuff that have to be done that that was intended for shock value, I'm sure, but the idea being that we consume way too much sugar, and these can be like the impacts. But I thought the thing that was probably even scarier than that, which we all know anyway, is that sugar just shows up everywhere, and it's actually, you have to be really consciously aware of what you're eating, because sugar has a way of sneaking into things you don't even think about sometimes. Like, I think in that episode he picked up like a loaf of bread and he was like, oh, there can't be too much sugar in that, can't there? And then like the nutritionist say, nah, actually, I don't know, I can't remember how many grams of sugar was in it, but it was kind of like a shock value type thing. But it can be really hard in today's day and age, unless you're I guess maybe eating, I don't know, maybe if you're buying all, not locally sourced, but, what would you call them? Primary foods like fruit and veg and meat and fish from the market or something that you actually have to go out and prepare yourself.
That's right. I actually had a good look at the list that you had there online, and gee, that's a lot of sugar. You know, when you're talking, around 100 grams a day. But the thing is it's no longer, just a bit of sugar that you might add to some home baked cake, or the odd teaspoon or two that you might put in your tea or coffee. This is in everything. It's in your processed foods. It makes things sweeter, and processed foods have really gone down that path of knowing that we like sweet, salty, crunchy, sort of soft foods, and sugar plays into that so well. And that's how it's in everything. So it's, as you say, all the stuff you don't think of, the sugar is in there. You have a nice soft drink that you really like to enjoy on a summer's or spring day like today, and there's a few more teaspoons in there as well. So it is in everything. It's very hard to get rid of, and you really have to think very carefully and disconnect yourself from that processed food chain to really escape it.
It's certainly the reason why I haven't eaten cereal, at least. Well, I might eat it rarely, but I haven't eaten it in years, because it's a bit scary. Even the ones that you would consider, that have got healthy labeled on the box, whole bran, whatever it is, 100% bran. Just check the box, the label on the box. You mentioned the list. They got this from worldatlas.com, and obviously it's like a top 10 of individual sugar consumption in grams.
Top 10 horror stories, Ben.
Obviously Australia's in there at number 5, 95.6 grams, where I think in the Jamie Oliver show, interestingly, they were saying around, I think they were maxing out at 7 teaspoons of sugar, which was roughly around 30 grams or something. Here they're saying 50 grams max, but we're way over it anyway. That's twice the amount. No surprises. I think with the US up at the top with 126 grams of sugar. And the bottom there, Canada at 89.1, which is still high. They're all within the margin of error, shall we say, as far as that's concerned. But it's a hell of a lot of sugar.
Well, that's right. But if you actually have a look, I think in most of those cases, you'll see populations where processed food, there's affluence in the population and processed food. I think the outlier is Mexico, and I think principally there's a very sugary cola drink that's very popular in Mexico, which is what gets Mexico into the top 10.
Absolutely. The other thing that I was going to that made me think of this was just, obviously I mentioned the surgery aspect and whatever, and again it's that shock value, because obviously the main I guess main thing that you'd probably want to be worried about is type 2 diabetes rearing its ugly head, which can have some devastating results. Obviously, you might be lucky if you get it that it's just monitoring, because like in the sense, and again, it's quite invasive because you have to be on top of it every single day. But if it gets really bad, you can start losing appendages and other things if you're not careful.
Yeah, it's certainly not good. And just remember, Ben, for those of us that aren't taking the full 100 grams a day, there's somebody who's doing double that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's scary. And I guess maybe a final point that sort of stuck out with me is just I think it's the prevalence of, I mean, yeah, you can go out and get so many sugary drinks and buy them from, stores. There's a lot of fast food around, but it's also just in the supermarket with packaged foods that's the real killer.
Precisely, and you can go and get yourself some yogurt, and there's sugar in there, and you can go and get yourself just a plain piece of cake, but there's a lot of sugar in there. If it's processed, if it's the issue with processed foods is the way they get them tasting so good and so acceptable to us ahead of home prepared meals and items is because they taste so good, and sugar and salt is how you do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So check what you're buying in the supermarket, because yeah, it's a bit of a minefield out there.
And just on that, you think you're getting some marinated meat, but the marinade's full of sugar. You can't escape it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, we'll move on to our second topic, completely different. The Internet Archive. I hadn't thought about this for a while because I've occasionally perused the archive just to even look up our own old websites, for instance, or even, I don't know, looking at some famous websites from, I don't know, 2006 to see how different things looked back then. But it's an important historical service, I guess, for lack of a better term. But apparently it was hit by a bit of a hack, which was a bit of a concern, really. Highlights again the fragility of the digital environment, I guess would be the way to describe it, that we're so dependent on all of these services, and even like something like this, which I guess we're not going to be looking up the Internet Archive every day, but it is a resource for the historical record, for lack of a better term, for the internet per se. And any one of these things can just be taken out by a nefarious actor or whatever. So it's quite tough.
It is very tough. I've had mixed feelings about the about the archive. Maybe up until about 2006, maybe there's some value in seeing what the original website for whatever government or business or whatever it was. But I think over the last 10 years, and as we move closer to Web 3.0, I don't think there's any value in retaining any of it, to be honest.
Maybe it'll turn into Internet Snapshot 1995 to 2020 or something, and then everything will all be behind social media and whatever else, which won't be accessible because all those corporations have got their hands all over it.
Well, that's right. I just don't know that there's been anything significant on the internet that humanity would want to keep in the last 10 years.
That's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. Alrighty, and all right, just shifting again to our last topic. We like talking about Apple here. We've been a bit bearish on on Apple recently, more just for fun because we've had a historical liking of their products or whatever, and you got to just wonder where they're at and whatnot. We'll start this with this rumor, maybe is the best way to put it, that Apple's potentially looking at shifting its annual release cycle. I guess they were targeting the iPhone in this discussion because that's the one that's like clockwork, gets released. A new model gets released every September, with the suggestion that maybe they don't do that, and maybe they perhaps drop software updates on a more regular basis, but the hardware becomes a bit more unpredictable, i.e. they release an iPhone when they think it's ready and has something new to offer hardware-wise, probably a bit more like what they're doing with the iPad and the Macs. And I just wonder if that, to be honest, I wonder if that's actually what's needed at this point. the MacBooks, for instance, I think are probably in the best place they've ever been ever. Like in terms of what
Couldn't
they've
agree more.
with what they've been able to do. So maybe the iPhone needs the same treatment so that we don't get down on the fact that the iPhone 16 is just the same as the iPhone 15 and was promised Apple intelligence, and it wasn't released on day one, so people don't have things to complain about in that regard.
Oh, and we had to wait till the iPhone 15 to get USB-C. I don't know, Ben. Like, look, you and I are Apple fans, but we also just don't believe the hype, And I think if I was in the marketing department, I'd be taking this as a cue to definitely stop dropping hardware that looks identical year after year. Unless Apple are going to have a roll-up phone or a virtual phone, or just convert their phone into their pods or something that's completely different in terms of form. I'm with this rumor. Just don't bother. We talk often enough here about how complicated Apple product ranges are these days, how near impossible it is to understand which device in a generic range of devices is the right device for you. This is Apple without Steve Jobs, and I've said this before. We saw this in the 90s, and I think we're seeing it again now. There's no one person there screaming at people, telling them to get one thing right on one product. They're more than capable. They produce great products. That's their history. That's in their DNA. So we don't have to argue about whether their products are good or not. But gee, please don't try to hype them up.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, in mentioning Steve Jobs, that's probably a good example. Like, obviously, he's got the complicated legacy of his character and all of that. But one thing he did bring to the table, which was obviously which made them abundantly successful the second time round, especially when he came back, was that he injected that level of almost care to the wind. We're going to do what he wants to do, obviously, but it was always what we're going to do and screw everyone else and whatever they think.
And it was usually impossible what he was suggesting as well.
Absolutely. So it made me think, just when you were saying that, it's almost like Apple's becoming almost a slave to Wall Street expectations now. So the reason why you release a predictable release pattern for hardware is so that you can keep investors happy and keep the numbers ticking over well and all of that sort of thing. The problem is that that's not what got them where they are. And at some point, Wall Street's going to start saying, well, what have you done for me lately? Which is apparently what they're starting to do now with like the recent releases. And then it's almost self-defeating. So it's like, maybe they need to recapture that. Let's just go out and find a way to be a bit more unpredictable and wow people a bit more.
Well, I think, personally, from my perspective, I think actually the mobile phone now at 15 years of age is old hat. And I really, you can put it in a clamshell or put it on a slate, whatever you like. It's not going to change. I think the next big thing is actually going to be the car and the phone one together. When they show that, and God knows what that's going to look like, and I don't think I want one either, by the way, but when they show something as big as that, there's got to be another change, just like the iPod changed. I
and
guess,
the iPhone and the iPhone as well.
And the iPhone changed phones and music. And until they find that next bit, yeah, there's probably not much point in having an annual, we redesigned the same shape from the ground up.
Well, I can foresee a future where, like, nobody's complaining that the MacBooks look the same. Okay, maybe they subtly changed the design, but ultimately MacBooks still look the same as they've looked for like 20 years, really. And no one's complaining about that. What they want is every so often, a chip upgrade so they can get a bit more juice going with, to run the latest software, or maybe make it more demanding or whatever. I don't think anyone's going to complain if they, mostly keep the iPhone hardware the same, but then just drop a new chip in it and just say, hey, we've updated the chip, you can do more stuff with it. But that doesn't, I guess maybe that's not as exciting if you put it that way.
Well, I mean, you can tell me how exciting a from the ground up rebuild is, but I don't know anyone who spends time looking at the insides of their phone.
Yeah, that's right. Unless you know how I think there's a service where you can buy like the entire innards of a laptop or a phone or whatever, and it's displayed in like a in a picture frame type thing that you can hang on your wall. Maybe if you're into something like that, maybe. But otherwise, yeah, you just want something that works.
Well, that would be a big reveal maybe for the next show.
Absolutely. All right, Steve, we'll wrap it up there. And actually, we might not be too far away from some new iPads and Macs coming, so maybe we'll have something to talk about there.
Excellent, can't wait.
Absolutely. All right, so that's it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next time.